About a day or so ago, Fortnite announced a huge tuning update to Chapter 5 Season 3, and depending on how you look at it, this update may have either just saved the season or may have just ruined the season for you. It's that big of an update, and in today's video, we're going to go over this update, all the details, and how it affects the season going forward. So with all that being said, let's get right into it. So according to a tweet from FireMonkey, I'll link his Twitter down below. And so he goes into detail on some of the things that are going to change. So the first major thing that is going to change how this season is played is boogie bombs were unvaulted. And in my opinion, this is a great change. This is obviously added to combat the vehicles, right? If you throw the boogie bomb, anybody in the car immediately gets out and start dancing. This is a counter, straight hard counter to cars. Again, in my most recent video, I talked about how I love the cars, but they needed to be tuned down a little bit and have some counters. This is an example of one of those, so great change here in my opinion. He then says that EMP grenades are teased to return, and I had so many comments in my opening video about Chapter 5 Season 3, and every single person said, cars are great, but EMP grenades should come back. This is the one season where they actually need to be useful. And so to me, this is an addition that I could have seen coming from a mile away. I'm really glad they added EMPs, and definitely necessary, again, as a counter to the cars. It also seems like the Nitro gauntlets are going to be getting nerfed a little bit, and they definitely need it to be, but I don't necessarily agree with these changes, right? So first, Nitro gauntlets will have a longer recharge time. That just is the time between using them in the air. I guess I don't really think that needs to be changed, but I understand where they're coming from. The next change is that Nitro shoulder bash does less damage. Yes, it was doing 75 damage. It was strong, but in my opinion, neither of these are the problem with the Nitro gauntlets. In my opinion, the problem is that there's no cooldown at all between swinging the actual melee ability of the gauntlets. We saw with, for example, the shockwave hammer, you would swing it and you'd be stuck in the ground for a couple seconds, you'd be vulnerable, right? We saw with the kinetic blade, you would swing and there'd be a little bit of a couple second delay between the final swings, right? But with the gauntlets, we see no cooldown. You can legitimately just keep swinging and swinging and swinging as much as you want, right? And so to me, that is the big problem. People are just dropping into your boxes and just continuously spamming through walls. To me, that is the bigger problem with the Nitro gauntlets, not the other stuff that they touch. So a little disappointed to see those not changed, but again, I do understand where they're coming from. And another change they made to an item was the boom bolts and actually making them do more damage to vehicles. In my opinion, this is a welcome change. I think the bow was intended originally to be the direct hard counter to cars, but we saw that it just wasn't doing enough damage. It was about 250 to 300 damage per bolt, and to me that was just too little. And so what they did was they buffed the damage. Now, I'm not specifically sure about the amount of damage buff, but look, some of these cars are having 2,000 plus health, and I will get into that, but you know, the bolts needed to do more damage. So in my opinion, if they're doing maybe 400 to 500 damage, even upwards of that, that would be a good and welcome addition in my opinion, and a great buff to the crossbow. So yeah, those are just some of the changes to the items, but more importantly, and probably what everybody has their eyes on, is the changes to the cars. And let's just set it straight here, these changes were never guaranteed to happen. We saw during Season X how broken mechs were, and they never got changed once. They were just OP the whole season. So I'm glad that they're actually listening to people and making the changes that in my opinion, are definitely necessary to keep this season at a balance for not only just casual players, but also the competitive players as well. And, you know, these changes could either make or break the season for you. I would totally understand if you'd be really upset and you were really enjoying the cars. And, you know, on the other side, I can see how if you hated the cars and they were too much, how these changes are a good thing. But, of course, let's get into these changes. So the first change we see is machine gun turrets have worse accuracy. Yes, this needed to happen. I think the turrets were way too strong, and I understand that doesn't change the damage, but it's going to change how many bullets you're going to hit on your target, therefore essentially just nerfing the damage. So yeah, I mean, I think this was necessary. I also think the grenade launchers needed to be touched, and they were. I'll get into that. But yeah, this is a welcome change in my opinion. They were too strong. And as I mentioned, grenade launch turrets, they also got changed as well. They now do less structure damage. So, I mean, I do think that they are still very strong. And of course, this really only applies to build mode for the most part. So I'm not really really entirely sure on this change. Like, I think the bigger concern, in my opinion, is that the player who's shooting the turret or the grenade launcher should be exposed, in my opinion. So I think they can keep touching the weapons on the cars and the mods all they want, but ultimately I think the perfect change to the weapons on the vehicle would just be to have the player be visible and on top of the car and able to be shot. Because in my opinion, that's the bigger problem, is you can just hop in these vehicles whenever you want and you're not punished at all for it. Like, you literally cannot get shot. I mean, maybe through the window, but obviously if a car's moving that fast, you're not going to hit that. So, I mean, I think these changes are okay, but not the changes that I personally was looking for to cars. But one of the changes I absolutely was looking for to cars was the boss cars, the mythic cars, quote unquote. They have changed it so that they do not regain HP automatically. This is a huge nerf to these cars, and definitely a nerf that needed to happen. These cars were way too strong. I mean, I had even seen players in my comment section, everyone was saying, I love cars, they're so fun, the mythic cars need to be changed. And so I'm glad these cars are finally getting touched, and they were way too strong. Being able to have 2,000 plus health, regain all that health automatically over time, you know, you literally could not take down these cars. They were a guaranteed win. So I think this change is necessary, it is welcome in my opinion, and it is a good one. And finally, I had just touched on this a little bit ago, but the vehicle HP has been reduced. Again, I talked about how the boom bolts were not doing enough damage to cars and how cars had so much health, but now you have a nerfed damage amount of HP to cars, and then you have an increased amount of damage to the boom bolt. So this update really is bringing a pretty significant nerf on the cars, and ultimately trying to bring more of a balance this season, because I think we can all agree, whether you were enjoying this season or not, the cars were just way too strong. In my opinion, I really would have liked to see them add the nerf to the cars, that the player who is operating the weapons would be put outside. I would also like to see at some point potentially the anvil rocket launcher being added back to this season. I know we had seen a lot of complaints actually about how the one season the anvil launcher is actually necessary and actually needed. Yeah, and it's not here, but I think this is the perfect season for it to be added. So ultimately, we'll kind of have to see how this update plays out in the grand scheme of things. If they went too far on the cars, which I do not think they did, but if it ends up playing that way, maybe they'll rebuff cars, or if they didn't do enough and cars are way too strong still, and they'll have to retune them again. It's going to be a balancing act all season, really. So I'm interested to see what they're going to do going forward and how this update is going to play out. But if you enjoyed this quick little update video, be sure to drop a like, comment, subscribe your thoughts on this update, because it is a mega update, one of the biggest season updates we have ever seen for sure. Let me know how you've been liking Chapter 5 Season 3 so far, and if you would like to see more Chapter 5 Season 3 content here on the channel. But with that being said, I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.